Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to the Don't Worry Dispatch. My name is Chris Novembrino. On this installment of the Don't Worry Dispatch, we've got a number of different stories to get into. First, we're going to talk about Beto O'Rourke's reemergence on the political scene. What is he doing now? Which governor of Texas will he be running against? And will he be running for governor of Texas? A lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of intrigue going on in that story. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. A little later on, we'll be talking about some of the stories that came down during the Friday news dump, including the FDA declining to endorse Pfizer's COVID-19 booster shot and what prompted that decision, what the fallout from that decision might be, and whether or not that was a particularly wise decision at this juncture. We'll discuss the pros and cons of this. I do understand the positions of both sides, and this is not one of these stories where one side is just spouting balderdash. So we'll try to add some nuance into that and give you kind of a multi-dimensional look at that. Speaking of nuance and multi-dimensional looks, I don't know that I can promise that for the story after that, which is going to be, God help me, Tucker Carlson and Nicki Minaj, specifically Nicki Minaj's cousins, brothers, friends' testicles, and whether or not they've been affected by the vaccine. Probably shouldn't go and get that booster shot. Probably something else going on with that story. And I swear that I actually have a somewhat, marginally interesting slant on this story. You can only get so deep with a story of that nature. Then we will talk about some stories that came down in the Friday news dump beyond the Pfizer vaccine. We'll talk about the drone strike in Kabul on August 29th. We will talk about Milley also in hot water for this story that was published in Bob Woodward's book involving his engagement with a counterpart in China. A lot of things to talk about in that story. And then last, I guess, I have to have the back of the Biden administration on something because I think that the people attacking them, a surprise attacker, not an attacker that you normally think of, coming after Biden here in the final story in the Friday news dump is interesting. It's interesting. So we'll get into that. Speaking of Joe Biden, though, just to start off the show here, his job approval rating, not great this week. And I think for a few weeks, the media and even the Republicans were trying to sell you on the idea that his job approval rating was poor because of Afghanistan. I think now Afghanistan has really dissipated, and it's pretty clear what people are frustrated with Biden over. You have the Republicans who are upset that Biden is just now beginning to start doing more with regards to the Delta variant. However, inside of Biden's own electorate coalition, myself would be included in that picture, are a chorus of people who have for a long time been saying that Joe Biden needed to be taking the Delta variant more seriously and that he was wrong-headed to be rushing to reopen schools, and that July 4th was an arbitrary deadline, and that the coronavirus was still really prevalent around the world. And so it was weird to assume that even with the domestic numbers being fairly low at that point, that the United States, with its very low vaccination rate, and Biden knew that at the time, we're low compared to our peers. Out of our G7 peers, the United States ranks 6th with 53% of all adults vaccinated, compared to places like England, et cetera, being much closer to 70%. The United States was really not in a position in July to really say that they were going to do it. Gain those numbers up real quickly. About 62% of Americans have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. However, in terms of fully vaccinated, it's about 53%. Canada leads the G7 countries in vaccination rate with almost 75% of its population at least partially vaccinated, followed by France, Italy, the United Kingdom, all of them above 70%, Germany at 66%, Japan at 63%. The United States, really dogging in that pack. So thinking that we were on our way to, V for Victory Day on July 4th was, just basically looking at a date on the calendar rather than looking at data on a table. So there is a group of people inside of Biden's own base who are not pleased with Biden's performance. And I think that all kind of comes together to make a picture that it's, 42% of Americans approving of the job that Biden is doing as president, 50% disapproving. Some of that is obviously Republican disapproval, but I think that there's a fair amount of liberal and progressive and left disapproval that is priced in there as well. I also just think that the new norm is going to be under 50% approval. So I think when we are looking at any of these presidents, especially in this era of negative partisanship, we might want to look at 45% as successful. So when Biden's at 44, he's maybe not doing all that bad, as weird as that is to say. However, right now, 44%, this is from a Reuters poll, approve of Biden's job performance, 50% disapprove. Rest were not sure, so that's 6% who aren't sure. So that might actually be his liberal base. However you want to slice it, these numbers are not great, but at the same time, if you believe, as I do, that the weakness here is because people want COVID-19 to be over, really the ball is in Joe Biden's court to do more to end this. I don't think people really think the Republican way out is through, like that you can actually just do what the Republicans say and this thing will magically be over. That dog isn't hunting. People just want to see a plan, in my opinion, from Joe Biden, a strong one at that actually guarantees that they can get back to business as usual. A tall order for Joe Biden. But speaking of that, why do I say that they don't have a lot of faith in the Republican vision of this? I think you've really seen that play out with Greg Abbott here in Texas. He is a very strong test balloon that this really Trumpy sort of iteration of the Republican Party, or you could almost call them like the neocons on overdrive, if you want. If you want to say that this is really less Trumpy than you'd think, I think that's a fair counterpoint to Texas for sure. I think Florida is more Trumpy than people realize because of DeSantis, but Abbott is very much cut from the Texas Republican mold, not like Ted Cruz Texas Republicans, like the more kind of nondescript Rick Perry, George Bush, central casting Texas Democrat types. Abbott's trying to play into that and try to do this tough guy thing, but the Republican way of responding to the problems of the world is not really jibing for even Texans. Texans want a robust governmental response to the power grid situation that we experienced here in December. Texans are not pleased that Abbott doesn't really seem to care about that. There are a lot of Texans, I wouldn't necessarily know or be able to say with confidence on the air right now that it's a majority. There are a lot of Texans who are extremely displeased about Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott's crusade to prohibit abortion in the state of Texas and ipso facto across the country. I think that there are a lot of people who are pretty angry about that, and rightfully so, but that's like a really energizing little moment. So like the power grid situation is a broad-based dissatisfaction. The abortion issue is a much more energizing, motivating sort of issue. And then obviously you have Abbott's response to COVID-19, which I think for a lot of people has left quite a lot to be desired. There are the people who support that sort of response to COVID-19, but even that is not the majority of the Republican Party, particularly among the business class. Many of the business class, yes, they like the Republican part with the low taxes, but they also like the part where their business is open. And this is also why entities like the corporate Democrats sort of exist, right? Like you have these pro-business Democrats, and this is why there is actually a coalition of these people, or what this coalition looks like. They want their business open. They know that mask mandates and vaccinations and all these sorts of things are good for their business because it means more commerce. It means that people who are trepidatious about going out and doing recreational stuff. Hi, how you doing? People who are staying in on the weekends and maybe doing things like taping a podcast. Maybe we'd go out on vacation or, go out and do something if we thought it was safer. Right now, I'm personally stuck in a loop where I've got to keep playing it safe 7 days a week because I need to be working because I don't have paid time off or anything. and there's not really that government backstop right now. Going back to the Democrats here, if they're worried about midterms, helping out, doing something on a stimulus check, a fourth round of coronavirus stimulus, showing that you guys care and putting the Republicans on the defensive end, saying, oh, no, we don't need that. The Delta variant's not a problem and stuff. The more the Republicans are saying things like that, the more I think they're losing. I also think in watching one of these press conference things, I don't watch them daily. I can't. Jen Psaki is not my jam. But Psaki did have a moment this week that I thought was very effective. Where was it Psaki? I think it was. Where she effectively named Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party and put the Republicans in this no-win situation where either they have to acknowledge the aging Donald Trump as still their de facto leader, which scuttles pretty much every presidential hopeful's dreams of running for president. Like if you're Ron DeSantis and you say Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, you might as well stop collecting money for your presidential run at that point. Well, I'll put it another way. You might as well keep taking the money in, but if you are a donor, you should stop giving money to Ron DeSantis at that point. Once he says that, it's over. However, conversely, once Ron DeSantis says that Donald Trump is not his leader in the Republican Party, based on the internal polling that we've seen with Republicans, with over half of them saying that Donald Trump won the election is a bedrock principle of being a Republican now, and Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party is a bedrock principle of being in the Republican Party at this point. I think what I saw was like 59% or something of Republican respondents in this one poll said that those were totemistic things. It's not really relevant if it's 54 or 59, to be completely honest, or 62. Anything over half tells you that it's the absolute wrong position for anyone who wants to be the nominee of the Republican Party to strive for. See Nina Turner and calling Joe Biden half a bowl of shit. Like these are just moves that you can't make and survive a presidential primary in. I like that move by Psaki. They should keep labeling the Republicans as the party of Trump and make them make a decision on this. Maybe that even works on a state level, especially with Greg Abbott being such an apparatchik. Now, O'Rourke, for his part, is not the strongest option. There is a stronger option than Beto O'Rourke. And I don't... This is not surprising to me. Sorry for that brief outburst of Kawhi Leonard. That's my face when I think about Beto O'Rourke. I have the Kawhi Leonard I'm not impressed face there. So Beto O'Rourke was a really nice story in 2018. And running against Ted Cruz as an empty vessel, aspirational hope guy who seemed kind of cool, that was good. The folksy, I'm doing 99 counties strategy and I'm making friends with people and we're getting my bumper stickers up all over the place and we're just doing it county by county and grinding it out. That was cool. That's probably how a Democrat wins Texas. Unless you want to just wait for the wave election and, give the Republicans a couple of extra elections because you don't want to actually try. But after O'Rourke lost to Ted Cruz, that was close, disappointing. Okay. Wasn't amazing in the debate against Cruz. Still not sure how I felt about him working for the clampdown on Ted Cruz. I think it's cool. I think I like it. As I ruminate on it now, I think I'm ultimately pro him saying working for the clampdown on Ted Cruz in that debate. But that's really neither here nor there. He decided to run for president as, I was going to say we all remember, but do we? Do we all remember that? But he did. He did. He shouldn't have, and he did. He could have ran against John Cornyn. Everyone wanted him to run against John Cornyn. I don't know that was actually that good of a move. I actually think Cornyn was a tougher out. Hard to say what the right answer was for O'Rourke. But the wrong answer was running for president, and he did that. He ran for president, and it didn't go very well. And so now O'Rourke's trying to get back on the scene, but he's not cool. If you talked to me 3 years ago, would have said O'Rourke's kind of cool. Not like really cool, kind of cool, like not uncool. Like he's not Squaresville. He's okay. Now he reeks of try hard. Like so much. There was like the thoughtful. I'm Jack Kerouac on the road, Beto O'Rourke, and I'm writing my little memoirs, and he wasn't good when he ran for president. There's so much of it feels so contrived. Even this whole will I or won't I thing feels contrived. Everything, like, he's not really thinking this hard on it. I would rather him just say what he actually feels. And I know he's capable of doing that, which is why I'm like, I don't hate him either, but like, he also doesn't do it on a regular basis. And certainly you'd got to think when he's governor, he would be doing it less, not more, than he currently is now. And at the end of the day, with O'Rourke, I don't think that this guy's got a brand of politics that I think is particularly worth fighting for, trying to salvage. So all things being equal, when I look at the Dallas Morning News University of Texas Tyler poll, I see Greg Abbott at 42% to O'Rourke's 37% here. And I see Matthew McConaughey at 44% to Abbott's 35%. So Abbott loses 7 points. And he is down 9 points to McConaughey. And I mean, yeah, okay, O'Rourke's only 5 point out, but like, why wouldn't you run McConaughey, who's 9 points ahead? I really do think that Matthew McConaughey is more or less the political equivalent of Beto O'Rourke. I'll grant that O'Rourke's probably slightly to McConaughey's left. If you'll grant that it's only slightly, it can't be very much. I'm sure there are an issue or two where McConaughey's magical centrism kicks in and O'Rourke is to the left of him on this or that, but it ain't much. Alan West, his primary challenge does not look very good, in case you were worried about that. Abbott looks like he'll be cruising through that, 65-20. That said, 65-20 in a heavily Republican state where they need to close ranks, not great. Paxton and Bush, even this is another one where you see a division. 43% with Paxton to Bush's 28%. Not like, the change is coming tomorrow sort of thing. And this is also why I would favor McConaughey. But you do see even some Republicans, and these would be your suburban Republicans and stuff, just think that some of this Republican abortion stuff, COVID-19 stuff, these are the things. This is not about Afghanistan here. They think this stuff is maybe going a little bit far. And they want to see, and by going a little bit far, what I'm saying with COVID-19, not doing anything and, reopening like Greg Abbott did and everything. This is an absolute mistake, but here we are. So we will see. We will see we'll see when O'Rourke runs, but we'll see if maybe wisdom can prevail here and McConaughey somehow gets the nod, because look, neither one of them are my particular jam, but if I've got to go with one, I want someone who can beat Greg Abbott. I got to be honest. I'm in Texas. This is not, can we get Bernie Sanders to the governor's office? We can't. That's not how Texas politics works. But God, if we could get Greg Abbott out of the governor's office, that'd be fantastic. That's all I'm saying. All right. Let's talk now about the FDA and this decision involving COVID-19 vaccine booster shots. A group of leading U.S. and international scientists suggested that vaccine booster shots, quote, are not appropriate at this stage of the pandemic. The international group of scientists, which includes some at the FDA and the WHO, concluded that boosting the vaccinated population doesn't outweigh the benefit of using those doses to immunize the billions of unvaccinated people worldwide. So when you are hearing this story, how often are you hearing it framed in the context of this is a decision about where to allocate those doses? This is not a decision about whether or not vaccinating booster shots is actually effective. Yeah, huge problem. Media is not presenting it this way, and so it is allowing the anti-vax people to go, see, you don't even need a booster shot. Actually, that's not what they're saying here. They're saying that given the option of giving people who have 2 shots already a 3rd shot, or giving, let's say, that guy who's like, you don't even need a booster shot, a first dose, it would be much more strategically useful, of greater utility, to give Mr. Skeptic over here the boost, or to give him the shot and give him the dose so that he's half vaccinated. You'd rather be fully vaccinated and have him half vaccinated than you have 3 shots. That's what the story is here. You're not getting that so often in the media presentation of this. So I wanted to start with that as the leadoff. Quote, none of the studies have provided credible evidence of a substantially declining protection against severe disease. Yeah, but you can't study the variants that we don't have yet. And I know that sounds a little bit glib, but like, we know that this thing's going to keep mutating. So we go, well, it is going to mutate. We are worried that sometimes it'll mutate against one of these vaccines. But then they're going to need to do a study. That study is going to take weeks. They're always going to be, at minimum, a month and a half to 2 months behind wherever the evidence is. So rather than going, well, we don't have a study yet that says that this is good, we actually need to be thinking a step ahead here. Reacting is what catches you flat-footed. The group did say that booster shots may eventually be needed for the general population if vaccine-induced immunity wanes or a new variant emerges that can invade the body's immune response. That can happen, and so you want to already just be ahead of that. This has been our problem the whole way through. Several recent studies published by the CDC suggest that vaccines hold steady against severe illness, including the Delta variant. The Biden administration, meanwhile, has proposed administering vaccine boosters 8 months after the initial shot, starting September 20. A committee of FDA advisors is scheduled to meet Friday to review the data. On Friday, late, they rejected a plan to offer Pfizer vaccine booster shots to everyone 16 and older. Members of the FDA's Vaccine and Related Biological Product Advisory Committee voted 16-2 against approving the booster shot after scrutinizing new data from Israel and questioning whether the data justified boosters for the general population when the current vaccines still offer robust protections against severe COVID-19 disease and hospitalization. Here you see the media spin on this, and this is like an aggregated piece that's like taken from the New York Times, CNBC. I forget which piece of copy I grabbed this from, but again, it's not a question of utility, and I think on that front there's really no debate. If it's me having 2 shots and Johnny, who has no shots, having 1 shot, I want Johnny to have 1 shot at minimum. Ideally, I want Johnny to get both shots. Or if we really think Johnny Skeptic's not going to get the shot, can we just give him the J&J vaccine? Like, really? I hate doing it, but if like we're going to deal with the petulant people, give them the J&J one. I know it's not it's not a bad one, but my understanding is that the Moderna one's better. But like, I'd rather give Johnny a full dose of the J&J vaccine than me get a 3rd booster dose of it. I mean, I still want to get a booster dose at some point, don't get me wrong. But no, I get that argument. No one's having that argument. But when the media presents it as, oh, well, there's just no real use for that, but maybe for older Americans and other high-risk groups, I don't know. Why does Greg Abbott have 3 shots then? I think that he seems to think that there is, going back to the dereliction of our governmental officials, there seems to be some utility in this. The votes are non-binding, and the FDA is expected to make a final decision on boosters by early next week. Hopefully, by the time that this gets out or edited together as like an episode of Don't Worry, cooler heads or smarter heads will have prevailed. Meanwhile, the CDC has scheduled a 2-day meeting next week to discuss plans to distribute booster shots in the United States. So, hopefully, the booster shot thing will work out, because, I mean, a thing that concerns me is that if the FDA does not approve this, that maybe the booster shots will not be covered and they won't be free, and therefore they will be less widely taken. And we're not close right now. The whole problem with this booster shot controversy is we are still like the worst among all of our global economic peers in the G7, as I sort of opened up this show talking about here. We need to be getting everyone to be getting the shot more. From the administration, I talked about this in the previous episode, it's been a real kind of like sticks-oriented approach here. Some, like New York City, I think, is offering, the carrots of we'll give you money and that sort of thing. I don't know why the federal government isn't doing it. I don't know why Biden's not trying to be the good guy here. I don't know why Biden announced all these new mandates and didn't also couple that with, oh, by the way, I'm also working on a new COVID stimulus relief bill, because that would have made him very popular. People like the stimulus checks. And, oh, by the way, economically speaking, not on the slate, but I did read it in preparation for the show today. The COVID relief bill did a tremendous job lifting a lot of people out of poverty and helping to stabilize a lot of people's incomes and stuff. And so it's a wonderful piece of economic policy that happened amazingly during the Trump administration that the Trump people and the Republicans will never, ever, ever take credit for, but it's arguably the best piece of policy that's happened in the last 6 years or 8 years. It's certainly the best piece of policy that's happened since Obamacare. And one could argue, depending on how much you're getting out of the Obamacare setup, probably better than Obamacare. I'm not trying to start a fight over that, but, worth talking about. All right. Got to talk about it. So you've probably seen, I have to imagine, if you listen to Don't Worry About the Government, you probably read a fair amount of online news. You're familiar with Nicki Minaj's cousin's brother's friend's testicles. You're not familiar with them. Like, we don't know them. We don't know. And we shouldn't judge because we don't know them like that. But they appear to be beleaguered, besieged, if you will. These are worn and weathered testicles. Because according to Nicki Minaj, guy was living his best life, about to get married, in love, and he got the vaccine. He didn't pray on it. He could have prayed on it. He didn't pray on it. And then his testicles became debilitatingly swollen. And that you hate seeing that. You hate hearing about it. You even just hate reading about it on Twitter. And I think it's great that Tucker Carlson decided to devote the entire week of his highly rated cable news show to doing segments on Nicki Minaj's cousins, brother's friend's testicles. Or cousin's brother. I don't know. Oh, it doesn't really matter. No, it does. It does. He's a person. He has real problems. But the testicle situation, I think, actually does illustrate something that I've had a hard time really discussing on the show. I'm not necessarily gun shy about talking about it, but I want to talk about it in a way that it is not conjectural or just armchairy, because it can be a bit of a sensitive subject. So I'm in Massachusetts last week for my grandmother's funeral. Rest in peace, Grandma. Love you every day. You are definitely one of the reasons why I am a dude who does political talk radio. So this show goes out to you. Love you, Grandma. And I'm up in Massachusetts for the funeral, and my family members and stuff are talking about how in the state, the state vaccination rates are actually kind of like the G7 America thing, where most of the states around 60-something% vaccination rate, except for Hampden County where we were at, where it's close to 53%. And everyone who, in my family and stuff, they're like, well, we're discussing why that is and what's going on there. And Hampden County has Holyoke, Massachusetts, which has a majority Latino population, largely Puerto Rican. I think when I was chatting with Cody the other day, the infamous Cody, I think we came up when we were looking at it, it was 48% Puerto Rican. It's been a big demographic shift here over the last 40, 50 years. Old timers up there will talk about that kind of thing. And Springfield, Massachusetts has always had a heavy African-American population. And Hampden County, the county where these two cities are like some of the largest cities in the area, like East Long Meadow's in there. It's got 16,000 people. Whereas like Holyoke has 150,000 people, which is probably kind of small to some of y'all, but like, compared to a town of 16,000, it's like 10 times the size. So they make up a large part of the population. So it's like, what is going on with people in Holyoke and Springfield? What is it about these places that are, and this is where it gets sticky. They are Democratic voters. If they vote, they're going to vote Democratic. They might not vote. They might not think there's anything into the system for themselves, and then they're not vaxxed. And I don't know. I think that sort of says something about the type of people we might hope to try to get engaged or whatever sometimes, right? So, like, the question is, like, why aren't those people getting vaxxed? And it does seem to be a different narrative than why do people who we talk about much more frequently on the right, the ex-Trump, not the ex-Trumpers, like they're still Trumping, but like why are right-wing anti-vaxxers so ravenous and frothing and passionately anti-vax? Like that's not that much of a mystery. Like you don't have to struggle all that hard about that. You flip on Tucker Carlson. He keeps having people like Scott Atlas on and other people. You look at Fox News, and despite their network having internal practices where everyone's got to be vaccinated, on the news network itself, they have vaxxo skeptics all the time on there. You look at Newsmax and you look at One America News Network, and it's not a mystery why the right is not vaccinated. But there is a smaller percentage left of center among what would be Biden's electorate who are not getting vaccinated. And there is, I think there hasn't been enough scrutiny as to what's going on there. But also, if you're asking me to kind of sit in my armchair and reflect as to, well, what do you think's going on there, Chris? I think the answer is really kind of buried right here in this Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend's brother's testicle story. There is, unlike the right, where you have Tucker Carlson, there is an informal network of celebrities and people who are not fucking experts about anything, who get elevated to levels far beyond their relevancy. Like, however you feel about Cardi B or Nicki Minaj or those type of people, they probably don't need to be major players in our political discourse. Like, they're not, and I'm not saying shut up and sing or whatever, but like, I do think that if you don't have your facts on point, and you aren't carrying yourself with a certain level of seriousness, and this is not like a civility scold, but like Nicki Minaj isn't helping the discourse, for lack of a better term, by coming out here and talking about her cousin's friend's brother's testicles. Insofar as she's even, making something worth discoursing on, I think she speaks to the fact that there is a real power of like urban legend and that sort of thing going on our side, that you get, oh, well, I've been hearing this sort of thing. Well, you don't know, but they are doing the thing with it. I'm reminded of that Saturday Night Live skit, Black Jeopardy, where they have the white guy on it, Clem, who's like a Trump guy. This, of course, is years before the coronavirus sort of thing. Like this week with the Nicki Minaj and Tucker Carlson thing, we saw the horseshoe kind of come together. We saw like the Black Jeopardy with Tom Hanks skit sort of come together here, where the week ends with Nicki Minaj retweeting Tucker Carlson clips talking about Nicki Minaj, and putting Tucker Carlson, a guy who is very clearly a white nationalist sort of fellow, and there's articles written on that, but I mean, really, I would just point you in the direction of the segment he did back in 2017 or 2018 on gypsies coming to a small town in Pennsylvania, acting like it was a national or international news story. And I mean, that's just trading in some of the classic white nationalist tropes in Europe. what we saw with Minaj and Carlson this week is the anti-vax horseshoe theory. And so insofar as it actually put a face to that and like a discrete moment where we can talk about what's happening on our own side of the aisle, by our own side, I'm saying, I guess, among the Biden electorate or any of the people that Biden might hope to be getting, I think that was useful. But outside of that, I don't. It was great for comedians too. Lord knows it gave me a chance to say the word testicles a bunch of times on the show today, and what fun that was! What fun! Moving on. Next, we have a story. Let's talk about Milley first. We'll talk about this story with Bob Woodward. I can't take claim for this joke, but it's so good that I just have to open up the segment with it. I heard what Bob Woodward's new book is about, and I found out what the title is. The story is going to be about a journalist who sees abhorrent acts time and again and bravely sits on them and waits until he writes a new book rather than move the discourse and then call it journalism. The title of Woodward's new book, this autobiography, will be called Complicit. Bob Woodward is a skis. And I felt like this with his books during the Trump administration, where he was sitting on clear, important points of evidence and things that would have moved the conversation, the national media narrative, would have changed coverage, would have changed maybe the way things were being investigated. And rather than actually reporting them out, he was just sitting on them for his little book. There are other issues with the way that he writes his books too, where he basically tells the story that people tell him. This is to say, Woodward's books very often sound like the person who talked the most to him. So you have the ability to move Woodward in that way. And I mean, I guess that's sort of true regardless. Like, I was watching a documentary on something else this week, and there were people involved in the story being told that chose not to be on the show. And, when you do that, you do allow everyone else to tell your own story. In this case, we're going back to Milley here. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff called China twice in the final months of the Trump administration to reassure them that Trump had no plans to attack China. This is according to Peril, a new book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, who I guess is going to be working for that Bob Woodward mantle here. Things may look unsteady, said Mark Milley to General Li Zhucheng of China on January 8th, 2 days after supporters attacked the Capitol to try to stop the certification of his election loss. Quote, but that's the nature of democracy, General Li. We are 100% steady. Everything's fine, but democracy can be sloppy sometimes. Milley was also reportedly so concerned that Trump could go rogue that he convened a secret meeting later that day with senior military officials to remind them that, quote, these strict procedures were explicitly designed to avoid inadvertent mistakes or accident or nefarious, unintentional, illegal, immoral, unethical launchings of the world's most dangerous weapons. And he added, quote, I am part of that procedure. Following the revelations, Trump called for, quote, dumbass Milley to be, quote, arrested for, quote, treason. Meanwhile, the White House says that Biden has complete confidence in Milley. Oof. This one's a complicated story, too, if we are being completely honest here. Because what Milley's doing here, especially with the specific timing, it's defensible in a way, isn't it? Trump absolutely called down the thunder on the Capitol that day. He spoke at that rally. How he went by, fist up in the air. Hell yeah, baby, let's do it. Let's have fun with this. Absolutely, Trump was complicit in the smashing of the Capitol. In terms of the transition of power, yeah, Biden was going to be in office in a few days, but I sort of read Milley calling China as Milley going, I am currently the adult in the room here and do not think you are going to catch me slipping, sir. And you almost want to applaud that. You kind of do. You kind of do. I mean, if you're a Republican partisan or like a conservative, you would never, because Trump. Everyone said that Trump was so bad, but he wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But like, for like the rest of us who watched what happened on January 6th, and we're like, holy shit, like, dude, he was ambivalent to supportive. I mean, like when he tells Mike Pence, don't certify this or we're not friends anymore, beyond being like childish and petulant, it's very clear what Donald Trump wanted out of that day. And he would have been very okay. I mean, if a lawmaker had been killed, he would have been okay with it. Come on, you know it. And don't kid yourself. Especially if it had been quote unquote the right one. Oh, he would have loved it. So I get it. At the same time, we have civilian control of the military for a reason. And it is not okay to have these military leaders freelancing, even when we have an idiot man-child as the president. I think that it is okay for these leaders, if they so desire, to come forward and say, in their humble professional opinion, the president is not fit for the job that he is tasked with, and this is why they are resigning. And saying it in loud and not unclear terms. I think that should have happened far more often than it did, which was basically never, during the Trump administration. I think that sends a very clear message, and doesn't allow for like any sort of ambiguity of, I want to go home and be with my family, or that kind of crap. I think that Milley making himself the de facto president here temporarily, that's overstating it too. He shouldn't have done this. Like on one hand, I applaud him for doing this. On the other hand, I think you don't talk to your Chinese counterpart unless you need to talk to your Chinese counterpart. So the real question here is, did the military brass really think that Trump left us so vulnerable to a Chinese attack that we needed to make some sort of meaningful overture to the Chinese to go, hey, we're not totally lost here? That's one way of reading Milley calling China and saying, hey, we have no plans to attack you. Parenthetically, it's implied yet, right? Currently, we don't have any plans. That could always change. I did just say attack in China in the same sentence, so that's a thing. I don't know, man. I don't know. I kind of think... I don't know if Milley needs to resign. No, he does. He does. Because he needs to resign over the Afghanistan stuff too. And I'm not even talking about the drone strike. Like, the drone strike is bad, right? Like, they admitting that, there was this drone strike on August 29 that killed 10 civilians and 7 children. Frank McKenzie, head of U.S. Command, probably needs to resign. The decision was, quote, made in the earnest belief that it would prevent the imminent threat on our forces at the evacuees at the airport. Like, okay, the hell with that. No, there needs to be some resignations over that. Absolutely. Those are all pretty abysmal situations. I got Milley though, man. I don't know. It's so hard to defend a general going over the head of the president, especially when sort of my takeaway on the Afghanistan war, for those of you who have not heard Gazpacho, it's like episode 532, I believe. My takeaway on the Afghanistan war is that the generals lied to us and sort of like usurped civilian command. They snookered. Look, okay, yeah, Cheney and Rummy and those guys wanted the war, absolutely. But time and time again, David Petraeus and all these other, McRaven and all these other people would keep saying, we're turning the corner. Every one of these surges is working. Trust us. Hey, Commander-in-Chief, please listen to us. And they'd grouse if a Democratic president, the only one was a Democrat, if Obama didn't listen to them, they'd all grouse and moan about, he doesn't listen to us. You know, he shouldn't. He actually should have listened to you less, if anything. To the extent that Obama didn't listen to them, I liked that because they should be listening to him. And Milley is kind of part of this tradition. Look, if you don't think you can serve and execute this dude's orders, don't execute them. Leave the vacuum there. They go, oh, I don't want to leave, this vacuum of continuity there. Look, especially when it comes to the nuclear cert stuff, like you can't just plug a new dude in there. I think even Trump's sort of hamstrung on how much he can do to immediately plug someone in. I think whoever would replace Milley would have been perfectly competent. And if they weren't, it's another organizational issue for these brass in the military to address. I'm really unsympathetic to Milley. I get how Trump's actions on January 6th open up the door for a broader discussion of what is and is not acceptable given those circumstances. But it was also only 12 days. Yeah. Screw Bob Woodward. Screw Milley. Screw Trump. I mean, really, here's the other thing. Milley doesn't have to make these calls if Trump doesn't try to run a multi-month campaign to reverse the results of the election. So whatever you want to say about Milley, and Republicans are really enjoying this discourse, and I know I have Republican friends and family who like to listen to this show because they appreciate that I give voice to this. Okay, and I have now. Now let us consider the fact that happened because Donald Trump would not admit that he lost in a resounding way in November and instead perpetuated a myth for months that there was a magical national treasure style secret button in the halls of Congress that if the unwashed masses just stormed the Capitol steps and Mike Pence just grew a real strength of character and fortitude, if those things happened, maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump would still be president. What do you even say to that? All right, final story here. Furious over the sub deal, France recalls ambassadors to the U.S. and Australia. The French are upset they had a very bad little Friday for themselves, calling American and Australian behavior, quote, unacceptable between allies and partners. France announced on Friday that it was recalling its ambassadors to both countries in protest over President Biden's decision to provide nuclear-powered submarines to Australia. It was the first time in the history of the long alliance between France and the United States, dating back to 1778, that a French ambassador has been recalled to Paris in this way for consultations. The decision by President Emmanuel Macron reflects the extent of French outrage at what it has called a, quote, brutal American decision and, quote, a stab in the back by Australia. My tone here is clear. I think that the French are being petulant little babies over this. In a statement, Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French foreign minister, said that the decision was made by Mr. Macron, who is understood to be furious about the way the United States, Britain, and Australia negotiated the deal without informing France. Australia on Wednesday canceled a $66 billion agreement to purchase the French-built, conventionally powered submarines before the deal with Washington and London was announced. In an editorial, Le Monde, the leading French daily, said, quote, for any who still doubted it, the Biden administration is no different from the Trump administration on this point. The United States comes first, whether it's in the strategic, economic, financial, or health fields. America first is the guiding line of the foreign policy of the White House. Okay. Well, France, you show us your altruism, and we will have a nice little talk about what altruism really credibly looks like. There's wanting things, and then there's a normative standard of what we actually think being charitable is. And sometimes they aren't the same thing. The Biden administration is bent on containing the growing power of China, and they see nuclear submarines in this deal as a way of cementing ties with Australia, and Australia is increasingly at odds with Beijing. So they want to make Australia more powerful. They do want to continue to signal to Beijing that we are not taking you lightly. Mr. Le Drian's statement said that, quote, the very conception that we have of our alliances, that our partnerships and the importance of the Indo-Pacific for Europe would be affected. Where before France believed it could work hand in hand with the United States in confronting China, despite French reservations over perceived American aggressiveness, it appears now to be reconsidering that view. I don't really know what the French's strategy was for dealing with China, because being nice has not actually really worked all that well. It hasn't been much of an answer for all the patent stealing and copyright stealing that the Chinese have been going through. Has not really been a great strategy when it came to getting on top of the coronavirus and figuring out the origins of the coronavirus. The Chinese government's not exactly been an amazing partner to the WHO. It doesn't feel like the French charm offensive approach, that French charm that they're really laying on so thick right now. It doesn't appear that French charm has the same persuasive magic that it once had when it was backed up with cannons and guns in the 20th century. What's the end part of that sentence? I forget. Mr. Macron had made growing French relationships with China a cornerstone of a strategy to expand Europe's role in meeting a challenge of China's rise. So then why not just roll with this and, like, at least, if you're really worried about that, at least put a straight face on this and don't, like, recall your ambassadors and stuff. Like, this is a business deal. Just, like, figure it out. There are going to be other weapons deals in the future. It's petulant. They're upset because Lockheed Martin was a partner. No, that's wrong. Disregard the last part. Anyways, you get the basic idea here. The French are being petulant. Well, I mean, when it comes to China, look, I think that the administration and the previous administration and the future administration are right to have a sustained muscular response to China. They are currently in an expansionist mode. They are, I'm not going to get into what adjectives I would use to describe their tactics, especially in the region or whatever, but expansionist certainly seems to be accurate. And it makes sense that the United States government would be trying to pursue soft power ways of showing China that we are not just going to roll over and play dead with regards to the Chinese expansion that is happening, being led by Xi Jinping, who has made himself a de facto dictator for life. I don't think it is wrong for the United States to have changed their level of intensity towards China over the last decade. And you might go, well, that's in response to the coronavirus. Yeah, that's part of it. But I'll put it to you another way. If the United States all of a sudden went from having a democracy to having effectively a dictatorship of one dude, wouldn't it be correct for many governments around the world to recalibrate how they feel about the United States of America? And obviously, you can go, well, China never really had an operating democracy. Okay, fair. What are we saying about the quality of their government then? But fair. Still, they used to have 10-year premierships, even in their one-party state, and now they have a dictatorship. That's different, and one of those is superior to the other. If you had the option of living in a country with a 10-year leader or living in a country with a dictator for life, unless you thought that dictator was fantastic, and some people who live under dictators do think that sometimes, you probably would not think that, and you'd probably prefer to live under the country that had 10-year premierships. So I get why the United States needs to have a different posture with China going forward. I don't want us to be going to war with them either, but I don't think we should be naive that this is just going to be kumbaya in the 21st century. I think that Francis Fukuyama and his treatise, The End of History, which opened up the 1990s, was the end of the 20th century. and if he had written it like that, it would have been just fine. But it's not the end of history. It's just the end of the 20th century, and we are now cruising as the year has a 2 in it. That's going to do it for this installment of the Don't Worry About the Government Dispatch. If you enjoyed this, you might want to check out the full episode of Don't Worry About the Government. That brings together the various dispatches of the week that get edited down. I add in a few things here and there. We're trying a little bit something different with that format here. So go and check out a long-form episode of Don't Worry About the Government, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. You're watching on YouTube, so subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, all of that stuff. That's how you'll know that new episodes are coming. You know how YouTube works. I hate saying the YouTube thing that you have to say, but I've said the YouTube thing now, so please do it. If you want to support my works, please go to patreon.com/DWATG. That's where you can find the place where you can support the show for $1 a show. $1 a show is all I ask. The dispatches are free, so you are literally paying for the aggregated every 3 episodes of this. So if you think this is worth 33 cents, please go over to patreon.com/DWATG and support the show. If you do that, I do put out extra content on there. I also I'll chat with people generally speaking, but we talk about stocks and other things too. I try to give tips and stuff that hopefully will help people save money. I like to be helpful in that way to people. I can't give people money, but if I can help them save money, it's like the next best thing. So anyways, get at me. Follow the show at DWATG. That's going to do it for this dispatch. Bye.